It is the very word for the old sweeping lines of the plough fields. From some accidental turn of a train journey or a walking tour, I saw suddenly the fierce rush of the furrows. The furrows are like arrows; they fly along an arc of sky. They are like leaping animals; they vault an inviolable hill and roll down the other side. They are like battering battalions; they rush over a hill with flying squadrons, and carry it with a cavalry charge. They have all the air of Arabs sweeping a desert, of rockets sweeping the sky, of torrents sweeping a watercourse. Nothing ever seemed so living as those brown lines as they shot sheer from the height of a ridge down to their still whirl of the valley. They were swifter than arrows, fiercer than Arabs, more riotous and rejoicing than rockets; and yet they were only thin straight lines drawn with difficulty, like a diagram, by painful and patient men. The men that ploughed tried to plough straight. They had no notion of giving great sweeps and swirls to the eye. Those cataracts of cloven earth, they were done by the grace of God. I had always rejoiced in them, but I had never found any reason for my joy. There are some very clever people who cannot enjoy the joy unless they understand it. There are other and even cleverer people who say that they lose the joy the moment they do understand it. Thank God I was never clever, and I could always enjoy things when I understood them and when I didn't. I can enjoy the orthodox Tory, though I could never understand him. I can also enjoy the orthodox Liberal, though I understand him only too well. But the splendour of furrowed fields is this: that like all brave things they are made straight, and therefore they bend. In everything that bows gracefully there must be an effort at stiffness. Bows are beautiful when they bend only because they try to remain rigid, and sword blades can curl like silver ribbons only because they are certain to spring straight again. But the same is true of every tough curve of the tree trunk, of every strong backed bend of the bough. There is scarcely any such thing in nature as a mere droop of weakness. Rigidity, yielding a little, like justice swayed by mercy, is the whole beauty of the earth. The cosmos is a diagram just bent beautifully out of shape. Everything tries to be straight, and everything just fortunately fails. The foil may curve in the lunge, but there is nothing beautiful about beginning the battle with the crooked foil. So the strict aim, the strong doctrine, may give a little in the actual fight with facts, but that is no reason for beginning with a weak doctrine or a twisted aim. Do not be an opportunist; try to be theoretic at all the opportunities. Fate can be trusted to do all the opportunist part of it. Do not try to bend any more than the trees try to bend. Try to grow straight, and life will bend you. Alas, I am giving the moral before the fable, and yet I hardly think that otherwise you could see all that I mean in the enormous vision of the ploughed hills. These great furrowed slopes are the oldest architecture of man. The oldest astronomy was his guide, the oldest botany his object. And for geometry, the mere word proves my case. But when I looked at those torrents of ploughed parallels, that great rush of rigid lines, I seemed to see the whole huge achievement of democracy. Here was mere equality, but equality seen in bulk is more superb than any supremacy. Equality free and flying, equality rushing over hill and dale, equality charging the world. That was the meaning of those military furrows, military in their identity, military in their energy. They sculptured hill and dale with strong curves merely because they did not mean to curve at all. They made the strong lines of landscape with their stiffly driven swords of the soil. It is not only nonsense but blasphemy to say that man has spoilt the countryside. Man has created the country. It was his business as the image of God. No hill covered with common scrub or patches of purple heath could have been so sublimely hilly, as that ridge up to which the ranked furrows rose like aspiring angels. No valley, confused with needless cottages and towns, can have been so utterly valleyish as that abyss into which the down rushing furrows raged like demons into the swirling pit. It is the hard lines of discipline and equality that mark out a landscape and give it all its mould and meaning. It is because the lines of the furrow arc ugly and even that the landscape is living and superb. As I think I have remarked elsewhere, the Republic is founded on the plough. The philosophy of sight-seeing. It would be really interesting to know exactly why an intelligent person, by which I mean a person with any sort of intelligence, can and does dislike sight-seeing. Why does the idea of a char a banc full of tourists going to see the birthplace of Nelson or the death scene of Simon de Montfort strike a strange chill to the soul? I can tell quite easily what this dim aversion to tourists and their antiquities does not arise from, at least in my case. Whatever my other vices, and they are of course of a lurid cast, I can lay my hand on my heart and say that it does not arise from a paltry contempt for the antiquities, nor yet from the still more paltry contempt for the tourists. If there is one thing more dwarfish and pitiful than irreverence for the past, it is the irreverence for the present, for the passionate and many-coloured procession of life, which includes the char a banc among its many chariots and triumphal cars. I know nothing so vulgar as that contempt for vulgarity which sneers at the clerks on a Bank Holiday or the cockneys on Margate Sands. The man who notices nothing about the clerk except his cockney accent would have noticed nothing about Simon de Montfort except his French accent. The man who jeers at Jones for having dropped an H might have jeered at Nelson for having dropped an arm. Scorn springs easily to the essentially vulgar-minded, and it is as easy to gibe at Montfort as a foreigner or at Nelson as a cripple as to gibe at the struggling speech and the maimed bodies of the mass of our comic and tragic race. If I shrink faintly from this affair of tourists and tombs, it is certainly not because I am so profane as to think lightly either of the tombs or the tourists. I reverence those great men who had the courage to die. I reverence also these little men who have the courage to live. Even if this be conceded, another suggestion may be made. It may be said that antiquities and commonplace crowds are indeed good things, like violets and geraniums, but they do not go together. A billycock is a beautiful object, it may be eagerly urged, but it is not in the same style of architecture as the Ely Cathedral. It is a dome, a small rococo dome in the Renaissance manner, and does not go with the pointed arches that assault heaven like spears. A char a banc is lovely, it may be said, if placed upon a pedestal and worshipped for its own sweet sake, but it does not harmonize with the curve and outline of the old three-decker on which Nelson died. Its beauty is quite of another source. Therefore, we will suppose our sage to argue, antiquity and democracy should be kept separate, as inconsistent things. Things may be inconsistent in time and space, which are by no means inconsistent in essential value and idea. Thus the Catholic Church has water for the newborn and oil for the dying, but she never mixes oil and water. This explanation is plausible, but I do not find it adequate. The first objection is that the same smell of bathos haunts the soul in the case of all deliberate and elaborate visits to beauty spots, even by persons of the most elegant position or of the most protected privacy. Especially visiting the Colosseum by moonlight always struck me as being vulgar as visiting it by limelight. One millionaire standing on the top of Mont Blanc, one millionaire standing in the desert by the Sphinx, one millionaire standing in the middle of Stonehenge, is just as comic as one millionaire is anywhere else, and that is saying a good deal. On the other hand, if the billycock had come